Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're doing something pretty amazing. We're going to connect some highly abstract, almost mystical concepts right to the gritty, everyday reality of conflict resolution. Seriously, we're taking the deep philosophical ideas of Carl Jung and turning them into practical tools for facilitators working in incredibly fragmented, high-stress environments, like modern homeless shelters. So if you've ever wondered how to actually bring order to absolute chaos without, just yelling louder than everyone else in the room, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this with a really provocative thought from Carl Jung. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. It's a huge idea, right? He's basically suggesting that even within the absolute messiest, most chaotic human situations you can imagine, there's a hidden, underlying structure just waiting to be found. It's not just random noise. It's a pattern. We just haven't recognized it yet.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. First up, we'll look at finding that order within the chaos, and then unpack archetypes as pattern detectors. From there, we'll shift gears into action with thermostats, not thermometers, and see how to use seed crystals in shelters. Finally, we'll wrap up with something absolutely crucial, the ethics of influence.
Let's jump right into Section 1, Order Within the Chaos, and explore the underlying unity of our reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates the idea of a unified reality, or what Jung championed as Unus Mundus. G.C. Meyer's artwork, Between Order and Chaos, captures this perfectly. Just look at the intense contrast here. Up top, you've got that slashing, wild sky representing absolute entropy and chaos. But down below, you see the very human attempt at structure, straight rows, clear paths, neatly organized flower beds. It's an incredible visual metaphor for us living right in that middle zone, constantly trying to impose meaning on the storm.
Now, did you notice something else going on here? That round flower bed caught right in the curve of the path perfectly echoes the sun up in the sky. This right here is what we call visual synchronicity. It's form recognizing form across a completely different scale, a meaningful coincidence. And the thing is, our brains literally crave these repeating patterns. Why? Because they signal to us that the world has structure, and ultimately that we are safe. Moving on to Section 2, Archetypes as Pattern Detectors, the Universal Vocabulary of the Brain. So how do our brains actually process these synchronicities? A lot of times we hear the word archetype and we immediately think of dusty old myths or, woo-woo magic. But practically speaking, archetypes are something highly compressed, evolutionarily successful pattern detectors. Think of them as the base software of the human psyche. You don't need any specific cultural training to understand them, because they map directly onto shared human experiences. They are locally instantiated, sure, but they're universally legible.
Let's break down those universal symbols as pattern detectors. The sun, it immediately identifies the source of life, energy, and wholeness. The path provides a sense of journey and movement, especially when we feel stuck in that middle zone. The house, specifically that red roof, is the ultimate universal marker for shelter, security, and the container of the self. And the tree represents growth, rootedness, and connection. Here's the wild part. Whether you are in Tokyo, Timbuktu, or Pennsylvania, these symbols hit the exact same deep neural circuitry. They instantly communicate profound truths, and they do it without needing a single word of explanation.
Now for Section 3, Thermostats, not thermometers. We're talking about shifting the collective operating state. So, the crucial point is figuring out how we take all this abstract theory of patterns and apply it to really messy human systems. There's a massive difference between just measuring a problem and actively changing it. Think about the old way of resolving conflict. It's like acting as a thermometer. You rely on logical persuasion, you try to win arguments, and basically, you're just measuring how heated the room is getting. But a master facilitator? They act like a thermostat. They engage in state modulation. They aren't just sitting back observing the chaos. They are actively changing the environment, shifting the energetic states, and regulating the chaos. See, humans don't just exchange information like a couple of computers. We actually regulate our reality together through relational patterning. A truly great facilitator knows they can't just settle for that safe, superficial middle zone of fake harmony. They have to be willing to touch the live wire. By shifting a group's underlying psychological state, they build what's called low authoritarian coherence, meaning order gets restored not because someone stood up and yelled, "Quiet," but because the group's nervous system was collectively regulated. It's a total game changer. Which brings us right to Section 4, Seed Crystals in Shelters. Let's apply this abstract theory to real-world chaos.
When you bring these concepts straight into high-stress, overloaded, deeply fragmented environments like a modern homeless shelter, you absolutely cannot rely on sprawling academic theories. I mean, you can't exactly hand a stressed-out in-crisis group an encyclopedia on Jungian psychology, right? Instead, facilitators use the path of compression. They use seed crystals. These are small, highly transmissible tools. We're talking pocket cards, short grinding rituals, and incredibly clear visual metaphors that can instantly anchor a chaotic room.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the exact three-step process facilitators use to restore coherence. Step 1, identify the shared symbol. You have to find that universal image, like the path or the house we talked about, that acts as a nucleation point to just grab the group's attention. Step 2, calm the nervous system. You use that shared symbol as an anchor to pull the room out of their reactive stress response. And then, step 3, shift the collective state. You gently guide the room back into a coordinated target morphology where everyone can actually start making choices together again.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the ethics of influence and protecting participant agency and dignity.
Now, having the immense power to literally modulate a group's state, that comes with some very strict ethical responsibilities. And this is exactly why a consent and transparency protocol is absolutely vital, especially when working with vulnerable populations. The rule here is super simple. Plain language, practical choice, and participant dignity must always take priority over the elegance of whatever method you're using. Participants need to be explicitly told what kind of influence is being attempted. They have to have the right to opt out with zero penalty, and they must be allowed to openly challenge the facilitator's symbolic frame. No exceptions.
Now, what's really interesting to note here is how facilitators actually prevent subtle manipulation. They use a very specific self-assessment rubric to watch out for what's called drift, which is basically when facilitation slowly drifts into coercion. For example, if a facilitator notices they're getting super attached to the participants accepting their specific metaphor, that's a red flag. It probably means the conceptual frame has become more important than the actual living human being's experience in that room. Or, if they start interpreting any disagreement simply as resistance, they might just be protecting their own method instead of listening to a totally valid challenge. Facilitators also have to be incredibly careful about the danger of overvaluing harmony. Think about it. If people are quiet and agreeable, but they aren't visibly relaxed, you haven't built genuine trust. You've just gotten obedience. And it gets worse. If you use calming tools just to speed past someone's anger or grief, you're literally just suppressing valid distress. These methods should absolutely never be used to avoid addressing real material needs or legitimate safety concerns. Okay, let's do a plain language pivot here and strip away all the fancy Jungian terminology for a second. The standard of this entire framework is not whether a group suddenly becomes quiet and agreeable. Not at all. The standard is whether people leave the room with more dignity, clarity, safety, and real choice than they had when they walked in. If the archetypes and the state modulation achieve that, awesome, it works. But if it doesn't, you drop the framework entirely. It's about the people, not the process. So, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the highly abstract to the intensely practical. We've seen exactly how pattern detectors can literally shift the energetic state of a room in total crisis. And I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. If archetypes really are the hidden language of our shared reality, what new order could you cultivate in the chaos of your own environment? Take that question with you today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for the secret order out there.